water heating systems. The reference for this section is the reference appendices section RA 3.6. As always, that's the link to find the document on the CEC website, and it's also available for download on the LMS system. HERS Field Verification offers credits for improved performance in terms of quality pipe insulation installation, for the installation of field-verified hot water distribution systems that are more compact and therefore perform better than typical hot water distribution systems, and for the installation of specific circulation strategies. The overall training goal for this section is to familiarize yourself with water heating systems verification protocols and forms. These are all the sections and water heating related credits that we'll be covering in this PowerPoint. So first we're going to be covering the HERS pipe insulation mandatory requirements. It's required for hot water distribution systems where the insulation shall fit tightly to the pipe and all elbows and teeth shall be fully insulated, as shown in the pictures. No piping should be visible due to insulation voids, with the exception of the last segment of piping that penetrates walls and delivers hot water to the sink, appliances, etc. Insulation is to be present on the first 5 feet of hot and cold water piping from storage water heaters. All piping from the water heater to the kitchen sinks and dishwashers have to be insulated. Also, all non-recirculating hot water piping of 3/4 of an inch diameter or greater. All hot water piping below grade has to be insulated. Also, all piping below grade must be installed in a waterproof and non-crushable casing or sleeve that allows for installation, removal, and replacement of the enclosed pipe and insulation. Piping below grade that serves any islands, sinks, or other island fixtures or appliance may be insulated with 1/2 inch wall thickness insulation. Now there are exceptions. Pipe insulation may be omitted where hot water distribution piping is in attics, meaning it's completely surrounded with at least 1 inch of insulation. Piping must be elevated from the framing, and piping is completely covered with at least 4 inches of insulation further away from the conditioned space. Or in walls, when it's completely surrounded with at least 1 inch of insulation. So in these particular scenarios, the mandatory piping requirements that we just described in the previous slides don't have to apply if the conditions in this particular slide apply, because basically the pipe will be already wrapped in insulation without any additional insulation be added to them. Now let's cover the procedures to actually verify HERS credits related to water heating. For the pipe insulation credit, the visual inspection shall verify that all hot water piping is insulated. This credit can only be taken for trunk and branch hot water distribution systems. The HERS rater will just visually verify that all the hot water piping is insulated. Hot water piping from the water heater to all fixtures and applicable shall be insulated based on table 120.3-alpha, usually 1 inch of insulation, typically equivalent to R4. The HERS rater shall visually verify, that all hot water piping is insulated in accordance with mandatory requirements previously described. And that is the table 120.3-alpha. As you can see, it shows the amount of insulation that needs to be required based on the pipe diameter and other variables. For central parallel piping or home run system, this measure expands on the requirement for parallel piping systems that use one or more central manifolds with individual runs from the manifold to each point of use. Visual inspection shall verify that all supply lines of the parallel piping system meet the following requirements. The maximum measured length of pipe from the water heater to each central manifold shall not exceed 5 feet. That's measured to the nearest half foot. The hot water distribution system piping from the manifold to the fixtures and appliance must take the most direct path. For example, in a house with more than one story and the water heater in the garage, this requirement would exclude running hot water supply piping from the manifold to the attic and then running the line back down to a first floor point of use. The lines have to be the most direct, shortest as possible. The hot water distribution piping must be separated by at least 2 inches from any other hot water supply piping and at least 6 inches from any cold water supply piping. Or the hot water supply piping must be insulated based on the conductivity range in table 120.3-alpha, usually 1 inch of insulation, typically equivalent to R4. That is the table that we saw a couple of slides ago that showed you the insulation for different size piping. The HERS rater shall verify that all hot water piping is insulated in accordance with mandatory requirements previously described. For the compact hot water distribution system, the HERS rater shall verify that the longest measured pipe run length between a hot water use point and the water heater serving the use be no more than the distance specified in table 3.6.4. Measurements shall be made to the nearest half foot. And this is the table that we just talked about a second ago. So table 3.6.4 specifies the maximum pipe length as a function of floor area served, where floor area served is defined as the conditioned floor area divided by the number of installed water heaters. So as you can see from the table, it goes by the floor area served in square feet, and you have the maximum measured water heater to use point distance. So each point of use cannot be more than that feet, the number of feet away from the water heater based on the floor area served by the water heater. So for example, in an area served between 1,001 and 1,600 square feet, each point of use cannot be more than 43 feet of linear distance away worth of pipe. The floor area of the building has to match the conditioned floor area used in the compliance documentation. Please ensure the hot water distribution system piping from the water heater to the fixtures and appliances take the most direct path. Verify that all hot water piping is insulated in accordance with the mandatory requirements previously described. Recirculation systems are not eligible for the pipe insulation credit, but HERS verification of pipe insulation is a mandatory requirement. For systems serving a single dwelling unit, the recirculating loop within a dwelling unit must be laid out to pass within 8 feet of each hot water fixture served by the loop. These inspections may require 2 visits, a ref and after all equipment is set and operational. Demand-controlled recirculation system shall operate on demand, meaning that pump operation shall be initiated shortly prior to the hot water draw. The control shall operate on the principle of shutting off the pump with a sense rise in pipe temperature, delta T. For this verification process, a manual switch is required. More than one circulation loop may be installed. Each loop shall have its own pump and controls. You need to verify the pump demand controls and thermal sensor are physically present. Manual switches shall be located in the kitchen, all bathrooms, and any hot water use location that is at least 20 feet that's measured along the hot water piping from the water heater. In the pictures, you'll see examples of strategically placed demand buttons that start the hot water. Manual control systems may be activated by wired or wireless button mechanisms. Verify that manual controls have a standby power of 1 watt or less. You also need to verify that manual controls initiate pump operation by pressing one of the manual controls and observing that the pump turns on and then shuts off in accordance with one of the two methods listed. After the pump has been activated, the control shall allow the pump to operate until the water temperature at the thermosensor rises not more than 10 Fahrenheit, 5.6 degrees Celsius, above the initial temperature of the water of the pipe, or the control shall not allow the pump to operate when the temperature of the pipe exceeds 102 Fahrenheit or 38.9 degrees Celsius. You will then want to verify the controls have a feature that limits pump operation to a maximum of 5 minutes following any activation. This is provided in the event that the normal means of shutting off the pump have failed. The manufacturer of the recirculation pump and the control shall provide installation and operation instruction that provide detail of the operation of the pump and controls, and such instructions shall be available at the job site for inspection. You will need to verify for this information to be present at the job site. You will then verify that pump and control placement for the demand of recirculation meets one of the following criteria. When a dedicated return line has been installed at the pump, controls and thermosensors are installed at the end of the supply portion of the recirculation loop, typically under a sink, or the pump and controls are installed on the return line near the water heater, and the thermosensor is installed in an accessible location as close to the end of the supply portion of the recirculation loop as possible, typically under a sink. Or, again, another option that you may have, when the cold water line is used as the return, the pump, demand controls, and thermosensor shall be installed in an accessible location at the end of the supply portion of the hot water distribution line, and again typically under a sink. You will then verify that a check valve is installed in the recirculation loop to prevent unintentional circulation of the water, also called thermosiphoning, and backflow when the system is not operating. This check valve may be included with the pump. The hot water distribution system piping from the water heater to the fixtures and appliances must take the most direct path. And again, for example, in a house with more than one story and the water heater in the garage, this requirement would exclude running hot water supply piping from the manifold to the attic and then running the line back down to a first floor point of use, just like we talked about in other distribution systems. The HERS rater shall verify that the supply portion of each recirculation loop is insulated based on table 120.3-alpha, usually 1 inch of insulation, typically equivalent to R4, as previously described. Also, insulation is not required on the cold water line when it is used as a return. All other hot water piping is insulated in accordance with the mandatory requirements previously described. For demand recirculation sensor control, the requirements for this credit are the same as the ones previously described for manual controls. A sensor control, such as motion sensor, door, and floor switches, are used to activate the pump rather than a manual control. For multiple recirculation loop design for domestic hot water systems serving multiple dwelling units, the visual inspection shall verify that a central domestic hot water system serving a building with more than 8 dwelling units has at least 2 recirculation loops, each serving roughly the same number of dwellings. Unique building sections may have additional recirculation loops. These recirculation loops may be connected to the same water heating equipment or be connected to independent water heating equipment. Ideally, each loop will have its own pump and controls. Now we'll be covering the form specific to HERS inspections related to water heating systems. The CF3R PLB21 is used for multifamily central hot water system distribution.
The The CF3R PLB22 is for single dwelling unit hot water system distribution.
And if you have any questions, give us a call, shoot us an email, or contact us through the messaging system in the LMS.